Hello and welcome to Cannamantv. My name is Connor McLeod, and in this episode I speak to lead researcher for the Seed Our Future campaign, Trev Coleman. In this interview we discuss Trev's recent bust by the police, UK cannabis law, the recent collaboration within the cannabis community, including Outlaw, We the Undersigned, Seed Our Future and Hemp Hound, medicinal cannabis, recreational cannabis, the CBD industry, and psychedelics and consciousness. Make sure to like and subscribe, and join us on Patreon, where for £3 a month you can help to build a stronger cannabis media platform. Now then, let's talk cannabis. How you doing, man?
Yeah, not so bad, man. Yourself?
Aye, I'm doing, man. Managed to get here. That's the main thing. I actually got a brown. For anybody watching, man, I got the brownie about 2 hours ago. I'm fucking pumped. So it's like, fuck, man. But anyway, Trev, so yeah, man, I actually watched about 10 minutes of your podcast with Simpa the other day. And I got to the part where essentially you were talking about the fact that 4 dudes breaking into your house and you phoned the police. Fucking, you ended up inside that night. You want to tell everybody that entire process, how that happened?
Oh, it was absolutely mental. Like, yeah, I was here on my own, and right now I'm suffering from some serious spinal issues that are quite painful. Any sort of weight on my left leg, and it's got us wanting to squeal like a 12-year-old girl. I hear a gentle rap at the front door. Go to answer the door, there's nobody there. Stick my head round the corner, I can see down the back alley there's 4 lads waiting to come through the back door. So I legged this straight in, managed to get the back door locked in time, barricaded the door, and being here on my own, pretty much defenceless against 4 guys, I just phoned the coppers. Yeah. Now I already know that the policy up here for the last few years has been to act on complaints only. So there's never been a complaint made against me, despite all my neighbours knowing what I do, knowing that I use, I grow the whole lot. But they still decided that it was an easy bust. They didn't bother going looking for the lads who decided they were going to break in here. They've got an easy bust with 70 plants.
Right. So essentially that's what happened. They didn't even look for the dudes, and you had, what was it, 70 plants in flowering stage?
No, not in flowering stage. All different stages. I can't remember. I've got no idea how many were in flower, and obviously getting next crop ready, and your clones, your mother plants, all the rest of it.
Yeah.
So I mean, there was quite a bit there, but one of those things. I enjoy doing what I do. See, I don't have any bother off my neighbours. They all support us. They always have. I mean, I've been on national TV with this and been asked about it by my neighbours. Yeah. And I've never had anybody bother with them. They've all supported us all the way through. They've never made a complaint against us in the 8 years that I've been living here. And at least, 6, 7, and I've been growing my own.
Yeah. So a lot of people wonder the process. So what happened? The police arrived. You were like, look, 4 people tried to break in, and then they just went, we can smell cannabis. We need to search the property.
Pretty well, not really. I told the coppers that the reason that I tried to break in was because I grow my own weed.
Right.
As I say, as far as I was concerned, they're acting on complaints only. Yeah, probably naive of us.
Yeah.
I haven't come from that background all my life, right? The vast majority of my working life. I've worked for the likes of GCHQ. I went to Iraq in 2003 so I could get my security clearance. That allowed me to go to work for the likes of British Aerospace, GCHQ, the police, MPS, CPS, the whole lot. Now, I know from your experience that you've got to have all of your documents, everything, all your ducks in a row before you do anything. That is simple government procedures. You've got to work at absolutely top level. And I'm watching these lads, and I mean, I haven't done the work for Seed Our Future, and known that they cannot verify the legality of their charges because they cannot provide foundation evidence for the Schedule 1 status of cannabis or foundation evidence for it being a controlled substance in the UK. Yeah. I was told that my detention was lawful. But if there's no evidence to back up the charges, how can it be lawful? Yeah. And I told them that at the time as well. There was one... Sorry?
What was their response when you'd said that to them and you're like, look, this is unlawful, there's no foundation evidence? What was their initial response? Just like a deer in the headlights looking blank?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, they just turned around and said, well, we've got your cannabis. And yeah, you've got me cannabis, but it doesn't meet the criteria you're claiming it does. Yeah. That's false by representation, which is fraud. And the 2 coppers that went to us, who initially came here, went to us with to the station, and I pointed out that I already had one of them on fraud. because he had admitted that cannabis has medicinal properties and then still busted us for a Schedule 1 in any case.
All right, so he actually said it in the process anyway?
Yeah. So he's admitted cannabis has medicinal properties, but I'm still going to arrest you for cultivation of cannabis as a Schedule 1 substance.
That is so robotic. That is just such a robotic position.
This is the whole thing that I see. What I saw was people following orders and not doing their jobs.
Yeah.
Now, when I first got involved in all of this several years ago through Teesside Cannabis Club, it was me that took Teesside Cannabis Club to the police. When, I don't know if you remember it, when they announced the decrim down here, where they weren't targeting personal growers.
Yeah, that's right.
It was actually me that broke. It was me that broke that news via Teesside Cannabis Club that all of the nationals jumped all over.
Right.
Because we see our future, I've actually researched the charges. One of the first things I went looking for was the evidence that the CPS used to legislate for cannabis as a Schedule 1. After about 3 weeks of searching, I couldn't find it. So I got in touch with my local police, Durham Police. I talked to a lady called Sweetie Sahani, who was, at the time, was Ron Hogg's personal assistant. And I asked her if she could direct us to it. She said she couldn't, but she would get Ron Hogg to give us a buzz later and maybe he could. So Ron gives us a buzz and I ask him the same question. Can you direct me to the evidence that the CPS used to legislate for cannabis as a Schedule 1? And he says, no. When I ask him why not, he turns around and says, because it doesn't exist. But surely if somebody asked for that evidence in court and the CPS couldn't produce it, then the case would collapse.
Yeah.
He agreed with us. So I was like, Ron, you just taught us how to beat the charges. And no, that's just the way it is.
Well, this is the absurdity that we're dealing with, though. We've got the people that are implementing these laws. They're illegitimate laws to begin with. So, and yet the process, they use the process to attempt to buffer some form of legitimacy. So it's like, well, I'm sorry, you're being processed, therefore it's authentic. But the reality is, it's like, yeah, the process in itself is illegitimate, which makes it inauthentic.
Exactly. I was told it was lawful, but I've got, with Seed Our Future, what we've done is to send out a series of freedom of information requests. Now, we've done that to every single force in the country, the CPS and the Home Office. Every single force in the country, but a couple of them, have turned around and said that they don't hold the foundation evidence for Schedule 1, foundation evidence for the claim of control, or foundation evidence for any form of misuse. The CPS have also said that they can't answer those three questions. The Home Office have turned around and said that the evidence used to enact the Misuse of Drugs Act 71 has been destroyed. I mean, destruction of evidence is a crime in itself.
Yeah.
However, that claim, again, is false by representation. Because the scheduling system is a global system. It came from America in the 60s or 70s. I think it was the 60s during the war on drugs. So that scheduling system is a global system.
Yeah.
And it's all based on a document that is held by the World Health Organization. Now, anybody watching this, if you do a quick Google, WHO/APD/56. That is a document that every single person right across the world has been used to criminalize all of us. And it's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, the page 8 is the one that always sticks in my mind because I find it funny as hell.
Yeah.
I mean, some people might consider it racist, but the whole document itself, if you read it, is highly racist.
Yeah.
And page 8 is an Egyptian doctor talking about how Mohammedan men engage in cannabis abuse to get a form of euphoria because they're sexually dissatisfied because they engage in female circumcision.
Right.
That is literally page 8 of this document that me or you could be criminalised on.
Yeah, it's without a doubt needing refurbished.
Just sit and read it, man. I mean, I cannot believe that nobody's actually ever asked for this evidence.
I think a lot of the time, this stuff a lot of the time gets archived. So it's like it gets processed and people just forget. And then positions that formally put these things in place have been positioned, replaced by other individuals. Time moves forward and people that are in positions that are supposed to actually implement these things have no knowledge of its even existence in the first place because they're too focused on today's legislation.
Yeah, I mean, it's as I was saying before. What I saw at the police station was trail horse mentality, which was a case of I did this yesterday, so I'm going to do this today. But I'm not going to go and check all this evidence to make sure that he's right.
Yeah.
I tried to present them with the WHO documents. I tried to present them with the CDL future documents, and they actively ignored it. They did everything they could not to read it. When I got once I was banged up in the cells, it was I told them I had a Freedom of Information reply from Steve White, who is the current PCVC for Durham Police,
right. And
it says that their office does not hold the answers to the 3 questions I asked before. And this guy in the detention suite, he turned around and said, "You couldn't possibly have anything like that."
That's what he said.
Yeah.
Even though
you're not going to go and check.
Yeah.
You just couldn't possibly. I could not possibly have evidence from the PCVC to verify that they can't verify the legality of their charges.
Yeah, that's outlandish.
Yeah, I've got exactly. Yeah, I've got the Freedom of Information request. I've had it from 2 Durham PCCs now. I've had it from Ron Hogg and from Steve White. Now I know for a fact in this country that the best defence is a good education.
Yeah.
Because the CPS have been blocking anybody who knows what they're talking about from getting in front of a jury for at least 6-7 years that I know of. It could have gone on for a lot longer.
Yeah.
This is why I mean, if you send somebody to jail, it costs £65,000 to send them there. It then costs them £40,000 to keep them there. So the first year of being imprisoned, that one person cost is £105,000 to the taxpayer. They then get slaved out to all these various companies who engage in prisons labour for 50 pence an hour, undermining proper jobs and wages. We're all getting screwed over in so many ways by this that
it makes it difficult. Sorry, when you go.
I always put a lot of this down to my genetics. Now, me mum's a Ouija. So
hey, on yourself.
I'm a product of the Surrey Heave, mate. That's where my mum and dad met.
Nice.
As my Scottish side, he's quite a tight bugger. He doesn't like getting ripped off. Whereas my dad's a Geordie, and naturally, it's got like Geordies have very socialist attitudes.
Yeah.
I don't like to see anybody else getting ripped off either. So once I discovered how there's so many ways, not just drugs. Drugs is just used as a smokescreen to scandalise the plant itself to everything else it can do. During my working life, I've worked in the military industrial complex. I've worked with fossil fuel companies, all the rest of it. Now, just those 2 industries themselves contribute to around 8 million deaths per year. I've never been judged on working for those sort of companies. Yeah. But as soon as I grow a bit of weed, I'm being judged as some sort of scandal to society.
Yeah.
It's
it is, man. And that's the thing. One other thing I was thinking of when you'd said that there about the prisons in particular, there's a systemic situation that's present, really, when you look at all of these things. And the prison industry is like a glorified example of how faulty the large elements of society seems to be in place. So it's like they've got this situation that there's a profit invested in collecting individuals under the basis of a criminal act, and that's essentially what you're dealing with cannabis.
Again, I can point you directly to a document that would help with that. The IHO's ACTA, the Case of Cannabis and the Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs. Now, I'm gonna read you a couple of paragraphs from this.
Yeah, go for it.
On page 2. Right, page 2, the last 2 paragraphs. The Secretary General of the United Nations quickly changed the pace of action on cannabis with the first draft of the proposed Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs, which was unveiled in 1950. It had been agreed that his office should prepare this to get the ball rolling on the process of agreeing a single convention. When the Secretariat presented its ideas on 27th of February 1950, the proposals for cannabis were radical. 2 alternative approaches to the substance were on offer. Both assumed that recreational consumption was bad and ought to be rigorously discouraged. However, the first alternative worked on the assumption that cannabis had no legitimate medical use that could not be met by other less dangerous substances. it proposed that the production of Indian hemp be entirely prohibited, save for the small amounts necessary for scientific experimentation. The second alternative worked on the assumption that cannabis did have legitimate medical uses. In this case, each national state would have to establish a monopoly which had the exclusive right to produce cannabis and trade in it. Each government would be expected to select from a range of measures to ensure that no cannabis leaked out of the system into illicit traffic. Measures that included starting state-run cannabis farms and the systematic uprooting of wild plants. Now, those wild plants that they're talking about are ours.
Yeah.
They've basically wrote it into international treaties that anything cannabis related will only be done in private and political interests, not in the public's. Now, if the police are acting in private and political interests, and not the public's, that's a breach of the Terrorism Act 2000.
Think how many people have been prosecuted on the basis of that over the years.
Oh, absolutely. Like I said, if you go through that document in 1959, the British government actually fought the implementation of Schedule 1 based on the antibiotic properties of the plant. It was only a few years ago that the guy who came up with the concept for the Northern Powerhouse, a guy called Lord O'Neill of Gately, he wanted to build all of that on a substance called graphene. Now, if you don't know about graphene, it's basically the future of everything. It's a layer of carbon that's one atom thick, lighter than air, stronger than steel, better storage properties than lithium, and it's more conductive than copper. Now, if you're making it from coal at the minute, it's something like 1.8 billion per ton. If you're making it from the sticks and stems of weed, it's about $500 per ton.
Yeah, Jesus.
Now, this same guy, before he left the Conservative Party to move up to the House of Lords, he called for £2 billion of taxpayer money to be handed over to the likes of Merck, Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson to come up with new antibiotics to fight antimicrobial resistance, while completely ignoring the fact that THC, CBD, and even CBG, which is the stem cells of the plant, are so highly antibiotic they kill off a MRSA.
Yeah.
You could have built the Northern Powerhouse and done your antibiotics in one go. Instead, we'll give $2 billion away and start putting in money into fossil fuel programs.
So what do you think that is then? That sounds like there could be a potential that it's not just they're aware of the knowledge and they just don't use cannabis. That sounds like blind ignorance of the potential of what cannabis offers.
It's not blind ignorance, mate. It's literal corruption. Our economic system is one of debt-based scarcity. Now, the harder something is to get a hold of, the rarer it is, the more that can be charged for it. Meanwhile, I've got tens of thousands of acres of land surrounding us that I can produce anything I want from. If I've got a crop that's worth $6 million per acre, which is current legal prices, California, cannabis is 8.2 million per acre with an economic multiplier of 3.5. Now, $8.2 million is 6.3 million quid. That makes every acre of land right now worth around 22 million pounds of industry right across multiple sectors of industries and disciplines.
Right, yeah.
But instead, we're going to do things. We're going to get coal. We're going to open up coal mines. We're going to start nuclear reactors. We're going to pay the Chinese for. There's so much that we could be doing with this plant, but we're not allowed. The only reason we're not allowed to is simply political interests, political and private. And the coppers are getting shafted more than anybody else, but they don't really know it.
Yeah.
In 2014, David Cameron, George Osborne put the black market for sex and drugs onto the figures for GDP. The value of that market is around about £10 billion. Now, obviously, people who work in the black market tend not to pay taxes. Mm-hmm. So what they did was a fancy bit of accounting work. And, you accept that you pay a certain amount of your car insurance premium for uninsured drivers. Mm-hmm. But what most people don't realise is that they now pay a certain amount of their income taxes to pay for the taxes missed from the black market. Now, remember everybody was kicking off about that 1.7 billion to the EU a few years back?
Yeah.
That was their share of it. So if it's illegal to profit from black market activity, how come the British government are taxing it to the tune of £10 billion a year with 1.7 billion going to the EU? And if it's being taxed, why is it illegal? Now, the coppers, as I said before, they're getting shafted more than anybody else. Everybody's getting the council taxes raised right now by 5% to pay for cuts to the police. So effectively, the police are going out to repress, they're contributing towards their own pay cuts through a rise in council taxes to go out and repress a multi-billion-pound industry that they're all being taxed on, whilst putting themselves into a position of misconduct in public office, which carries a lifetime sentence.
Fuck, Trev, that's getting put on the screen, man. I'm quoting that fucking sentence and getting put on the screen.
Well, that's the way it is. That is literally the way things are right now. Right? If you look at you think about it, if a copper goes out there and they do a bust, right? Schedule 1, controlled substance. That's false by representation. Class B penalty. That's how much you're going to lose and how much their pension pots are going to make, because all fines go to pay police pensions. So effectively, so they've made a claim it's false by representation with the intention of you making a loss, their pension pot making a gain. That's fraud. That's literally Fraud Act 2000.
Yeah. Well, that's a systemic. That's systematic. So how would you go about that? Because in all honesty, Trev, sometimes I think, because this is all legislation based, obviously, and legislation gets manipulated through political interest, and political interest is boring as fuck, man. Everybody's bored with listening to politics, so nobody engages. So people like myself and others, you don't actively engage with politics because you see the system is fundamentally flawed at the beginning. So what do you do about that? How do you combat that situation?
For me, I think we're future going about it in the right way. I don't think we're going to see change top down, but we can see change bottom up. Now, if a copper is in the process of a crime, you are well within your rights to place them under citizen's arrest. Now, what I'm doing, I'm pressing the criminal charges against coppers who came to my house. I've also put complaints in with the police ombudsman against the PCVC and the chief of police, simply for the fact that, like I said, they're going out there, they're getting their men to go out there and enforce this without even looking at the documentation. Yeah. I've looked at it, I've reviewed it. And it's not just me that's reviewed it, it's the likes of Guy Coxall from with Hemp Tank and Seed Our Future. You've got Steve Harrison, who's also a Seed Our Future in Flora Fusion, just down the road from Hughes and Faith, and others. Yeah. And unless there's actually evidence to back up what they're doing, then by definition, that it's fraudulent. Yeah. So we can go after the low-hanging fruit, which is the coppers. According to the Police Federation, each and every one of them are independent legal entities. And unless they do their job properly, they face civil action. So that's what I'm doing. I'm going for civil action against the coppers. This isn't about being civil disobedience or anything like that. This is about absolute respect for the rule of law in the chain of command. Now, as an IT tech, I can put a system together and know that if a command isn't put in right somewhere, then it's going to affect everything else down the line, which is kind of where I started with this. As an IT tech, I was tasked with what's known as break fix, which is basically going around, seeing what's wrong with a piece of equipment and correcting it. So it's basically, right, so why, if I'm getting benefits from smoking this, from using the oils, whatever, why does the legislation say this? Why does it say it's a Schedule 1? Yeah. Now, that's what set me off looking for that evidence. Now, if that evidence doesn't exist, it sends everything else out to kilter. So what I did was to look at that law and use the other laws to prosecute against it. So, as I've said before, Schedule 1, false by representation, controlled substance, false by representation, Class B penalty. On top of that, there's obviously more than one person involved. Criminal Act 1977 for conspiracy. You've got the You've got the Theft Act 1968 for blackmail, because it's an unwarranted demand for money with threats and menaces, because they kind of back up the charges. What else was there? There was another one. There was a hate crime one. I think it was a crime and disorder act 1998 for discrimination. Oh, yeah.
So the best thing you would recommend is to probably... You would recommend essentially to individuals that are in essentially a similar position to yourself, and anybody that's obviously a cannabis consumer, educate yourself in the law, and if you get put in a position like that, no civil disobedience, just engage with the exact laws that are illegitimate.
Exactly. What I've done is to show that the law breaks the law. So the Misuse of Drugs Act 1971 breaches the Terrorism Act 2000, the Fraud Act 2006, Criminal Act 1977, Theft Act 1968, Crime and Disorder Act 1998. And then there's in Black's Law Dictionary, if you go and look at the word caution, it says that it's a command from an officer that they expect a certain behavior from you. As the cautioner, he's the person who's handing out that caution. He then kind of takes it on the toes for anything he does there. And in doing so, he sets up a process called cautionary. The cautionary is where he basically says, I'm going to follow superior orders and take it on the toes for anything that I do wrong. Mm-hmm. This is kind of the system where, if you look at the Nuremberg trials, the guys up the top who were passing out the orders, they all went off and formed the UN and NASA and all the rest of it. Yeah. Whereas the guys at the bottom who are carrying out the orders, they're the ones who are lined up against walls. That's how that same system is still up in operation now. The ones at the top have covered their asses by letting the guys at the bottom take it on the toes. And they don't even know it.
Yeah, that's a difficult one, because these guys essentially are taking it on the toes in the form of getting up every morning and going to their work. How would you create that disassociation between the reality?
I think about this, and it's like, it hurts me head to even contemplate wanting to go to work like that.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I get the whole mentality of wanting to be a copper and wanting to do good in your society, in your community, and all the rest of it. But unless you're doing your job properly, then you're not helping your community. You're not being a benefit to them.
See, the thing is,
you're being more
100%. Being a cog in the wheel, essentially. But you know what's quite interesting? Listening to you, man. You're so educated on this that people would refer you to as a loony, right? And this is what we're dealing with when it comes to this, right? You're so educated in this, and that's what it comes to when it comes to this situation. You're talking to people who are so far detached from the truth that when you actually offer them point blank fact on a plate, like with a reference and a fucking URL, they refer to conspiracy people. How do you work with that?
Quite easy. I don't deal in conspiracy theory. I deal in conspiracy fact.
But they'll regard it the same. They won't understand the difference.
You know, everybody talks about cannabis prohibition as a conspiracy theory, but it's not. It's conspiracy fact, and there are court records that prove this going back 100 years. I mean, even the original case for prohibition in 1937, you had Harry Anslinger sat in court saying just one marijuana would make white women want to sleep with black and Latino jazz musicians.
Yeah,
that's on court record. And that's a breach of the Crime and Disorder Act 1998 for race hate.
But again, Harry Anslinger, he was celebrated in those circles. He was celebrated as a pioneer for all that kind of shit. And that's how corrupt the system is. Like, how do you... It's a difficult one.
That Schedule 1 document from the WHO, he actually has an entry into it.
What, like a fingerprint? Like, legitimately, like he's got
a... He actually puts like a power... I don't know how much he puts into it. I've not gone that far. But Harry Anslinger has an entry into the Schedule 1 evidence.
All right, as like an expert, like an expert in the field, that kind of shit.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's insane. It's funny, I actually did a cartoon on that on Harry Anslinger that was like it was a Cannamantv cartoon. I'll have to throw it up in the video now. And it's essentially, that's just Cannamantv, and Donnie walks into the office and the secretary's like, Mr. Anslinger, you've got fucking people here to see you. And he's like, what? People here to see me? And long story short, Cannamantv and Donnie kill him, and they leave him as an ashtray on the fucking table for the joint.
Oh, there's the thing. When I got busted, when I got home, right, I had a load of chocolate bars that had been, Dose chocolate bars, that had been gifted to us by somebody. Now, these were stashed away in a corner, and where I thought they wouldn't be found, but obviously they found them, and decided to get stuck into them.
What?
And left the packet open all over the table. So the coppers who trashed me house actually were engaged in drug abuse whilst they were here.
That should, do you know, it would be very interesting to get them tested to see if they had cannabis in their system.
I hope the Giffers did, because I put a complaint in straight away about it.
Yeah.
And I sent them all the photos a whole lot. They smashed a load of, what do you call them? The strip lights. I can't remember the proper name for them.
The HBS lights. The
No, the proper strip lights, like the kind you would get in your kitchen sort of thing.
All right, yeah.
I had some T5s on me props. So they smashed all of them in the room. Now, those lights have got barium and mercury in them. They have to be disposed of properly.
Yeah.
So as well as engaging in drug abuse, they also left me home in an unsafe manner.
Did you take? They should have took photos of all this, man. This.
Oh, I have. I've taken photos of all of it. And I've put complaints in. I'm also filing criminal charges against all of them, and I'm taking, like I said, I'm going to take them in civil court as well.
You know, the frustrating thing when it comes, good on you, Trev, and keep pushing for it, man. It's a very anxiety-inducing experience. But one of the frustrating things is when it comes to the police and then the police policing themselves, you know, disciplinaries and stuff like that. It's always frustrating because you see these like the IPCC, they're just filled with ex-police, you know. So it's like it's exhausting.
Oh, absolutely. But we've got to go through this. I mean, right now, one of the most exciting things I've seen for a while has just been announced today. Outlaw down in Manchester, he's going for a judicial review.
Right.
And I do know a little bit about the background of this. And what's happening with that is that he's putting the money in for the judicial review, and he's using the Seed Our Future case with the WTU evidence pack. So effectively, you've got 3 groups going for judicial review, and if we don't win the judicial review, then from there it's going to be mass litigation, sort of class action lawsuit sort of thing. You've got everything that we need.
The fact that all 3 of you, we undersigned, obviously Outlaw and Seed Our Future. That's exciting shit, man. That's brilliant. This is what we're wanting. You know, community fucking based movement.
Absolutely. I mean, I've got to say, Phil Monk and Guy Coxall and Kevin Jones from Hemp Hound and Outlaw together. With that backing and that sort of backing, we can get somewhere. Yeah. We've got something with at last.
Excellent. That was today. That's fucking dynamite, man. So when's that? What's the next movement? Is this what we're looking at the beginning of April?
Yeah, that is. Yeah, I think it was the start of April. He's putting the documentation in for the judicial review, and I don't know what he's got planned for April 20th if they don't come back with a reply within 14 days.
Yeah.
It'll be fun to find out. I will be watching along with everybody else. I'm wishing them every bit of luck in the world.
That's fucking exciting stuff, man. That's brilliant. That's and the thing is as well, by the end of April, I think that's like lockdown should be easing off and then all this, because the thing is, one of the things I think to myself, like COVID, man, has made a huge dent in the economy. It's painfully obvious to anybody that's related to cannabis in any way. They're like, this is the fucking void. This is the void that gets filled with this. Cannabis fits the economy. It boosts the fucking the job market. All that, everything follows after that.
Oh, absolutely. Again, you've got to. Right. In Colorado right now, dispensaries are outnumbering Starbucks, McDonald's, and 7-Elevens combined. Right. During the 70s in Northern Ireland, there was a banking strike, and it went on for 6 months, and nobody really noticed it, because what happened was the pubs started taking over running the economy. So because the pubs all knew their locals and knew the money, they could get the money off this one, that one, the other one, whenever they had it, the pubs took over running the economy.
Right.
Nobody cared about the banks. Yeah. Now, just transfer, instead of having those pubs, have dispensaries. Yeah. This is why in the first year of legalization, they're going about how we've got record employment in the country at the minute, but council taxes is a leading form of debt in the country. Mm. How can we have record employment whilst council taxes are a leading form of debt?
Not only that, I would point out the fact that most of the people I'm aware of are struggling to find work. So I don't know where they're getting this information.
Exactly. Now, if you look at what's happening in Colorado, their first year of legalization, every state has a budget that they have to meet. So, like, I'm not sure what it was at the time, but once they hit their budget and everybody's putting their taxes in, because they couldn't deal with the banks, it was all going straight to the state. They actually bust their budget by $66 million. That's a state of 5.5 million people. Scotland is what, 5 million?
Something like that.
And they're turning over. Colorado's turning over $2 billion per year now.
Yeah. Well, these are the numbers that have been in place for what, since 2016. Was it Colorado's 2014 when they opened the doors?
I can't remember. It might have been now. I haven't got that good a memory.
I don't think anybody involved with the fucking movement has. But this is the thing, though, and I think that's one of the. I think the next stage of conversation was then, if we were to move through legalization in the UK, what's the form of dispensary model? You know, what is the then appropriate model that, because what you're then like 90% of the industry is hoping to then prevent monopolization. Nobody's wanting to see a Starbucks.
I think right now you've got, the Tories want to put in a Canadian model, which is utter bullshit as far as I'm concerned. It's that you're allowed 4 plants, and if you get caught with more than an ounce, you got so much time in jail and all. It's just Prohibition 2.0. Yeah. Don't let the Tories tell us what we're going to do with this. We know better than them, so we have to fight, and it's from the bottom up. It's not going to happen top down. They're going to do everything they can to block it. But if people can jump on this thing with Outlaw, I genuinely believe that we have a chance of doing something special. I really, really want anybody who's watching this, everybody in the country, get behind what he's doing. Get your statements over, and we need everything we can. Inundate the bugger. Let's really have this. It's about time.
Yeah, it's definitely 100%, Trev. I mean, this is and everything, even I think COVID, that just all the chips on the right area, and I think medicinally as well. Those need to open medicinally. CBD's regulation, unfortunately, needs to get fucking corrected. I mean, synthetic seems to be the direction. They need to get rid of that. But there seems to be all the chips seem to be falling. The next couple of years. I'm really hoping by the end of this year. But I think I was actually interviewed. I think it was the legalized cannabis campaign in Scotland, and I think Linda had said that interestingly, it was the same with medicinal cannabis in the UK, even though it didn't actually officially happen. But in 2018, when they changed the law, mainstream changed it anyway, on the face of it. It happened overnight. So in March that year, nobody was really talking about it that much. And then it was like April, the conversation started with Billy Caldwell and then with Alfie Dingley. And then by June, July, paperwork was getting signed up. And then November, it was, moved into medicinal. So that's potential's there. Again,
that was just an utter, excuse the language, but clusterfuck as far as I was concerned. Everybody wanted to move to medicinal, so they got Schedule 2. So what Schedule 2 means is it's got medicinal benefits, but a high propensity for abuse, which I suppose could be fair for some, but it still doesn't meet that criteria, because according to their own criteria, a drug in a higher category cannot have harms that are worse than in a lower category.
Yeah.
So, I mean, benzos, they're Schedule 4 and they killed 800 people in Scotland last year. Yeah. Whilst weed is safer than peanuts. It doesn't even fit Schedule 5.
Yeah, what was it that said something like if the side effects are worse than the original symptoms, the thing should be disregarded. Something like that.
I'm not sure on that
but
one.
If you take the pill and it makes you feel fucking, if you're committing suicide and all these different things, and then the initial reason you took the pill was you were slightly depressed, maybe you should get rid of that pill.
I
would say as well, one of the things that's quite interesting is that when you said that the potential for abuse, I think that's what highlights cannabis's relatively benign impact physiologically. It's like it's able to be abused, but even when it's abused, the potential for it to have a negative consequence in your life is minimal.
Very minimal. I mean, the worst you're going to get is probably a whitey.
Yeah.
I've had one or two of them in my time.
Yeah, I think we all have. Interestingly, I've actually never whited when I've smoked it with tobacco. I've never actually whited smoking it pure.
That's a very fair point. That's something I've never noticed before. Good one.
Yeah. One of the worst ones was I was like 14 and I got handed a joint. And I remember standing at the window and it was that thing where there's everybody sitting there and it's peer pressure. You're only 14, you're just engaging for the first time. And I pretended to smoke it for the first wee while. And the guy looked over and went, "Here, mate, you're not doing much with that." It's like, shit, wait, smoke this.
First time I ever had it, I was working on a British aerospace site down in Luton. One of the lads I was digging with at the time, he was a big smoker, but I was a complete prohibitionist. I hated all drugs. And this was 2004 we're talking about.
Right.
One day I just had a really, really shit day at work, and he offered us it, so I took it. I had one of the best nights sleep I'd ever had. I couldn't talk or anything like that. I tried to ruled. You know? The first time you do it, it does absolutely cane you. That's to be working on a British aerospace site at the age of 34, being a prohibitionist, first discovering weed. It was like, wow, what a fucking revelation. But it wasn't until around about 10 years later, after being branded a junkie twice from use of cannabis for pain relief, that I actually went looking for why is weed illegal. And the reasons for it being illegal were just mind blowing. To think that we're doing everything with fossil fuels and trees and all the rest of it because a bunch of middle class white people got scared into thinking that they'd be shacking up with black people. It's wow. It's why would you be doing this? I mean, where's the logic in it? I can't find any. The only thing that makes sense is that economy of debt-based scarcity, which is why the Tories always protecting their economy, because they've got everything monopolised. Them, they want to keep everything monopolised. They don't want us having a share. They don't want me being able to go out and farm 6 million quid's worth of resources from 1 acre of greenfield land. Everybody could do it, and it would chop the legs under them.
And that's the thing. It's so painfully obvious that it's all about freedom. That's all this is. It's like to give the individual the freedom of independence to be, to engage recreationally with something that's completely holistic, on the basis that alcohol can be accepted though, because it's taxable. It's like, there you go, you can have some alcohol, which is known to kill. I think 1 in 5 deaths every minute is caused by alcohol. 5% of all diseases globally is caused by alcohol. The numbers speak for themselves.
I think again, you hit part of it on the head there in its freedoms. Now, there's a time in our history that is very, very relevant right now. It was called the Reformation. The Reformation, I know for a fact that your area still suffers from the blowout of that, because it came about because Henry VIII wanted a divorce. Because the Catholic Church wouldn't give him one, he broke away from the Catholic Church, formed the Church of England and Protestantism, effectively setting up all your sectarianism. Now, that made the UK kind of a pariah state. We were cut off from all trade with Catholic Europe. So effectively, the Brexit of its day. And to get around that, what Henry VIII did was to mandate that all farmers had to be farming hemp. Now, we're not talking about the 0.2% stuff that we know nowadays, because that's an aberration that only came around in the 60s. And it's, again, hemp is all about limiting productivity. So we were making literally all our ship sails, all our ropes, clothes, gruel, even the gunpowder in our cannons, all of it was all made from weed. In the cargo hold of all of these ships that were going all over the world, the likes of the Golden Hind, the York Raleigh, the Mayflower, each of these ships all had a cargo hold full of hemp seed wherever they went, so that they could farm every resource they would ever need. So effectively, what the British colonies were, the British colonies the colonies of the British Empire, were a resource-based economy. And they were given that freedom to move around the world because they had every resource that they would ever need with them. It is literal freedom, this. It frees us from an economic system that is crippling the planet. It's literally killing off all life on Earth.
And do you know the thing that pops to mind as well is that the idea of swapping a fucking yellow field for then a field of hemp, and how absolutely blown away that the general public around, certainly where I live anyway, would be at the concept of that.
And I'll give you again another prime example. For every ton cultivated of weed, it sequesters 325 kilo of atmospheric carbon. That's effectively a third of every plant is drawn from the atmosphere. So from 1937, if you go onto YouTube on there's a 30-second video of from the UN of temperature anomalies over the last 100 years. You think about the 3 dates for prohibition. Started in 1937, so we prohibited growing it in 1937. In 1961, we start the war on drugs. So you've now moved from prohibition to eradication. In 1971, that added hemp to the single convention. So we've taken part of our biosphere that sequesters 325 kilo of atmospheric carbon for every ton cultivated, whilst burning literally gigatons of carbon-based fossil fuels and engaging in mass deforestation. If you watch that video from 1937, the temperatures start to creep up. From 1971, they shoot up from there. It's every time you go to fill up your car, you're contributing to it.
That's causation. That's like scientifically speaking, that's what that is. That's causation. There's like that's not even on an implied basis. That's like the consequence of it.
Exactly. I mean, we're literally this one policy is literally killing all life on Earth right now. You say you've got 8 million deaths per year from fossil fuels. What about the rest of the biosphere? Your biodiversity is all dropping off a cliff at the minute. In the UK alone, we've lost, I think it's 17 species of pollinating bees. You're talking all of the oil spills and everything else that have happened, the likes of your BPs and that. Yeah. That's all destroying.
When you mentioned the bee thing there was an article actually that came out recently. I hate to put it up when we're talking here that the bees apparently respond brilliantly to, I think the article referred to it as hemp, and hemp responds brilliantly to bees, and it's like that they both complement each other's eco-environment.
Yeah, there was a company in New Zealand a few years back. I've got to find this article for you. It's brilliant. There was a crew got themselves set up in New Zealand, and they were using bees to pollinate the weed and also harvesting the honey. Right. Apparently, they had the coppers were very surprised at how little manpower they were using. This is something that this is a project that I want to know. I actually want to work with bees and weed, and I want to tap into my local history. Being a Geordie, I'm like, well, right smack in between us, we've got Lindisfarne. Lindisfarne.
Yeah. The thing is, I did a product review of hemp, CBD honey the other day for Holistic Highland Hemp, I think. And that's what I was wondering myself. I was like, I wonder if it was actually bees, man. I wonder if the cannabis plants, bees are flying over there. They're like, fuck, this is all right.
If you've ever bred any plants, you know what it's like when you get a male. There's just loads and loads of pollen that comes out of those plants. Yeah. It's a latent pollen source for bees. So having those plants on the go all the year round, it's great for them. It increases biodiversity. There's the hemp fields in Colorado are attracting 23 types of bees. I want to know what's in them hives. That's what I want to play around with. And like you say, I want Cannamantv. I want to see what pharmaceutical products are in there. There's so much more that we could be doing. Yeah, it's mental that we're not allowed to.
Well, that's the thing. That's what makes it so weird, Trevs, because it's not as if it's like, hey, cannabis can be a medicine, or it can just be this one or this isolated situation. It seems to be that cannabis benefits the human race generally. That seems to be the reality. There's such a diverse range of impact, socially, culturally, through health, like through the ecosystem, the economy, like over and over. I mean, it takes nothing to keep looking to find more reasons why cannabis benefits the planet.
I can give you a great cultural reference that everybody knows, but nobody connects to this. You've seen Oliver Twist?
Yeah.
Please, sir, can I have some more? Gruel was a byproduct of hemp seed production. What we used to give to prisoners and orphans as slop is now a multi-billion-dollar dietary fad.
Yeah, that's a belter, man.
No, like I said, these are things that nobody connects to. I mean, like I said, the Mayflower, as I was talking about before, those famous ships that went all over the world, the Golden Hind, the York Rally, the Mayflower, they all fought the Spanish Armada, but the Mayflower, that was the one that colonized America.
Yeah. And
that was Americans' weed.
Yeah. That's fucking crazy, man. That's what I mean. The foundation of most countries is built on these things. I mean, maybe not, like, certainly...
It's our fault.
It's what?
It's our fault. We took it all over the place. Henry VIII made ships take it all over the world. Literally every colony we set up, the first crop that they laid down was weed.
Aye, but if you look at like, what's that history? I think, what was it? The origins of cannabis comes from the Himalayan mountains or something like that, or like the foothills of the Himalayan mountains, and then that's what then it walked its way up and all this. Like, that's one of the things I wonder. It's like, where? Because it seems to, it's bizarre. It's almost like an alien fucking species of plant, you know.
Did you know there's actually legends of it being an alien plant?
Is that right? I love talking to you, Trev, man. This is fun.
There's a tribe in Mali, really, really fascinating people called the Dogon.
Right.
And every 50 years, they have a year-long festival to all things cannabis, because they reckon it was brought to Earth from the two-dog star, Sirius, by an alien race. I can't remember what they call them now. But if you look at the language of the Dogon, it's all quantum mechanics. They knew about Sirius years and years before we even discovered it in the 1970s. There was a Greek philosopher who actually visited them who got told about it. It's all in his chronicles.
That's interesting, because that's one of the things that even the history of humanity itself is this weird, diluted, it's strange. Like, people that take the surface basis of like the 6 o'clock news people, these people don't count in the conversation. When you look at the depths of occult knowledge and esoteric behavior and all these different other things, man, it seems to be very strange, because you do kind of go down to this depth. When you're saying that which alien race, I was thinking maybe the Sumerian. What was it? The Anunnaki. You know, it might be them, and maybe the two dudes fell out because the guy was 2.5 ounce.
I'm going to connect all of that for you as well. I've got a real idea. Right. The Dogon, they talk about people that they met after the Great Flood that they called the Nomos, who had the bodies of men and the heads of fish. For me, very, very reminiscent of the Sumerians. You know, every depiction you see of Sumerians have always got that fish head sort of thing on, the little bags and all the rest. Now, in our history, there's a time called the Younger Dryas. It was a comet broke up and passed through our system, and it laid waste to the northern hemisphere. The first one burnt off something like 95% of all biomass on the planet. The second one left a 19-mile wide crater under Greenland. It was a mile-wide chunk of iron that hit. The ice shelves at the time were something like 2 miles deep, and unleashed just a massive tidal wave of obviously frozen water all over. Sea levels rose something like 50 feet overnight, something like 70, 80 feet by the end of the year. Now, there's a tribe in America called the Hopi. They have legends of a people called that they refer to as the Ant People, who taught them to survive underground during 2 cataclysms, one of fire, one of water. If you translate the Hopi version of, and if you take the English version and friend and turn it into the Hopi, it's Anunnaki.
Is that right? Oh. Well, this is the thing, man. I've actually got it down here. I've got a book that's what's his name, man?
Hancock.
Manly P. Hall. That's it, Manly P. Hall, and it's like secret age. Was it knowledge of the secret ages? It's literally down here, but there's tons of shit on it, so I can't move it. But he talks about that kind of stuff. How there's this connected language between all the different religions. All of them reflect the same story. You've got, I think it's probably wrong, but I think Buddha, I'm probably saying it wrong, but it's like Buddha died and rose after 3 days. Jesus died, rose after 3 days. Both were born to virgin mothers. Every single religion seems to indicate some form of relationship between behavior and the fucking cosmos. All these different other, and then consciousness seems to be the fucking nucleus, the constant variable which this playing ground exists.
I've got another one I'm going to add that's right in between me and you. In the Sumerian Chronicles, they talk about Mithras, who was, again, who was crucified and raised from the dead 3 days later and all the rest of it. There's a temple to him on the Roman wall just up the road.
Excellent. So that's just for the big man. There he is.
I absolutely love my history. The man you want to be looking into, for me, I think his work's going to be absolutely revolutionary, is Graham Hancock.
There he is, Graham Hancock. I love his stuff. Do you know one of the things I watched him on the Rogan podcast when he interviewed, he was being interviewed and he was sitting with a colleague, I can't remember. And he went Sorry?
Randall Carlson.
That's right. And they talked to the what's his name? But it's a really weird thing to call yourself. A skeptic. That's it. They talked to the skeptic guy. It's a bizarre. I mean, it was they kind of went a bit heavy on him, and the dude was fucking shitting it. But I just thought it was really weird that that's a category of person that they refer to themselves as skeptic. So it's one thing to be skeptical to somebody's particular opinion, but you got to listen to that opinion first to engage in the like proclaiming yourself to be skeptical. Just generally speaking, it's like, mate, you need to be more fucking direct.
It's since then that guy's actually taken that back, because I once found that 19-mile wide crater on Greenland. Is like, yeah, Hancock could be right.
Yeah, that's something. This is what I mean.
Actually, the podcast that I did with Randall Carlson and Graham Hancock before that one, honestly, it is the most frightening 3.5 hours of TV I have ever watched in my life. Despite the fact that 3 guys sitting around a table, they're being, Joe Rogan's being shown the devastation that this cataclysm wrought right across America. And yeah, I've got to admit, it was mind-blowing to think that all of these stories could have the Great Flood and everything else actually had foundations in reality. So all the evidence is there. The Sumerian Chronicles, it's the Bible's a badly translated version of the Sumerian Chronicles.
Yeah.
And the Bible's made up of the Torah, the Bible, and then you've got Islam who come along a little bit later on, but they're all offshoots of the same Abrahamic religions that go back to Sumerians.
Yeah. This is the weird thing, Trev, because this is what, and then you take, this is what I mean, then you've got these seemingly empirical stories that are describing human behavior, very often archetypal, so you've got like Jesus is the meta-moral, describing himself in a particular behavior. If he engaged in a certain behavior, you feed the masses with very little and all these kind of things, metaphorically describing the universe responding to that behavior. And then you've got the same situation, and then you take psychedelics, and psychedelics in particular DMT that seem to show that there is a much deeper foundation to that with these so-called like machine elves and not even the description of machine elves, but the seeming reality that, yeah, there's an area over there. There's something over there right now. And that's what it seems. So take away the psychedelic thing, there seems to be a consistency between behavior, mythological stories, and the basis of this subconscious presence, like archetypes. And see, I don't know, there seems to be this consistency between psychedelics, religion, and consciousness.
Absolutely. Again, I consider myself a Gaia theorist. I like a good balance of science and spirituality. Yeah. With psychedelics, right now, we are bioelectrical engines, if you will. Yeah. So anything at the chemical level, that's going to obviously alter its atomic structure. Yeah. If you start playing around with the atomic structure, that affects the quantum signature. So you ingest something like psilocybin, which your brain's just a quantum computer in any case. It only processes so much of the visual spectrum and doesn't process everything else. Yeah. That's, for me, that is similar. By introducing those chemicals, it's just allowing your brain to process what's around you in a different way. Yeah. The thing with DMT, if you look at what we are carbon-based life forms, right? So we're literally layer upon layer of carbon. And if you look at how they make quantum computer chips, it's literally just one layer of carbon on top of the other. One layer of graphene on top of the other, sorry. So literally one layer of carbon to the other, you get this quantum signature in between. So we've got all of this carbon, all of this quantum signature right the way throughout us. When we alter with stuff like, for me, my preferred way of doing it, I like to take shrooms and DMT at the same time. Right. I don't think for me, I've never had the experience with DMT on its own that everybody seems to have. I get swirlies and that's about it. Right. I don't get that breakthrough, the machine, as you put it, the machine elves and spirits and all the rest. Never got that. But the combination with psilocybin, I was away 3.5 hours. I experienced all the space and time and all the infinite variables of the universe in this massive atom. It was one of the most incredible experiences I've had in my life. I'd never believed that the human brain would be capable of something like that. But I do believe it's simply the human brain it's simply a human brain processing information on a different level. Yeah. It's
do you know what Sorry, Trev. That's what I was going to say. When you described that there, when you said you could see things that are already kind of present, I describe it in a very similar way that these chemicals, the psychedelic chemicals, they heighten sensory perception. So that what you ordinarily perceive is restrictive. So it's based on these restrictive senses that are very regimented and very orientated on what to do now. And so it disregards very vital information. And I use the example of the internet, that the internet lives all around us. Let's be honest, it's present at this moment in time. We're engaged with it, but we can't see it. We see a consequence of it. We see the laptop, we see the screen, we see the discussion, we hear the noise. This is a consequence of something that we can't see and engage with. And this is the exact same process. And one of the things that I find quite interesting is it's like, I think Plato refers to it as the absolute, or that there's this normative point in which it's like a baseline almost. And it's like baseline is the frequency in which everything corresponds from. And I think this is one of the things that I think consciousness is very intriguing that way, because it's like this. It's like a production of a preceding element, which we maybe refer to as God or whatever, subconscious or something, that there's a preceding element. And I think that's what psychedelics allow us to do, is that most people that have described what you've just described, describe a unity when they break down through psychedelics. And that unity could be the baseline. That could be we're resorting back to the fucking point. We're going back to the Big Bang. That's essentially what we're dealing with.
Yeah, I believe that all psychedelics should be widely available. I think the effects of them are really profound. And after a dose of DMT and shrooms, I'm mentally bulletproof for weeks afterwards. Yeah. But even just having a trip on shrooms, you have a bad trip, it can be highly beneficial for you.
Yeah, very often.
The thing I really like about the psychedelics is that they tend to be quite introspective. You alter your behavior and all the rest because of it. Yeah. I genuinely believe that they can make people better, just to be better people.
Yeah, and the thing, I fully agree, Trev, like 100%. And I think that's maybe the reason why they also prohibited them in the first place, because they've seen this. I mean, all the studies that were getting done in the 60s, when they started, the results of the studies were unusual and foreign, because they didn't know what they were dealing with. People that were smoking, and it was an immediate cessation of smoking after one single dose. And not only that, I think one of the most intriguing things is the mythological aspect of psychedelics, that you can deal with atheists who have a lifelong dedication to there is nothing except what we see empirically, and then they take again one psychedelic dose and immediately their whole perception's changed. And that either means that there's a legitimate truth that exists that psychedelics touch on, or that humans are just so weak that it takes very little to alter our opinion. I think it's the first one, in all honesty.
I have no information. Should alter your behavior though. So if you're getting a download of quantum information from parallel universes that you're interacting with without even realizing it. I mean, there's one of my mates was telling us right, he is an animal, to be fair though. I mean, he had about half an ounce of shrooms and then DMT on top. And he reckons he could say he was connected to the great architect in the sky sort of thing. Yeah, he goes, you know, the all-seeing eye, the pyramid and all that. That's what he was seeing, all the hieroglyphics. I've never had an experience like that myself, but I've experienced the connectivity that DMT can offer.
Yeah.
Which,
did you never feel like there was a presence? Did you never feel like there was this, I don't know, just a presence? There's a thing is that just your own consciousness, do you think? Is that what you're experiencing?
Very possible. I just, as soon as the DMT hit, I just kind of sank back into the bed, and well, it was almost like my mind was processing all the parallel universes, looking at all the infinite variables. It wasn't really doing anything that I would consider a spiritual experience. I didn't notice any sort of presence, despite the fact that I felt very, very comforted.
Yeah, that's the feeling. That comfort. I mean, did you feel like physically like, oh, I'm relaxed? I mean, I felt like it was weird, a weird comfy feeling. Like, what the fuck's this feeling?
That was just by 5 gram of shroom as well, you know.
Yeah, I'm pretty certain your comfy feeling wouldn't have been my comfy feeling. I had that missing.
Oh, that was lovely.
Still be fucking coming.
I was experiencing all that, but honestly, that was one of the best trips I have ever experienced. It was. I never thought the human brain could be capable of producing such a profound experience.
I don't think that experience will be as cool as your fucking t-shirt though, Trev. I've just noticed what it says in the middle of that. Good man. Fucking high five, Trev. That's dynamite.
There can be only one, mate.
That's right. Fucking yes, Trev. Do you know what's funny? I'm like an hour and a half in and I've just noticed. Fuck's sake, man. Dynamite, Trev. Fucking love it.
This one.
Fucking love it, Trev. Dynamite. Appreciate that, man. I think as I've said it before on the channel, but I had a guy. I worked at this bakery, this fucking confectionery place, and I had to go. Had to start at 3 a.m, so I had to show up at like fucking 2:30 a.m. It was a fucking graveyard shift, and I went in on the first day. And there's this dude standing there, and I walked through the wee fucking reception part, and I was like, mate, where have you got to check in? And he was like, I was just in here, I'll show you. And he walked in, and we're going to just fucking like check in. And he was like, right. And he's scanning his finger down the thing. He went, hey, what's your name? And I went, Connor McLeod. And he fucking shot around and he went, no way, man. And he fucking got his phone out, and he's fucking holding himself with this big fucking 6-foot sword, him and his mate and shit like that. And they're all in Orkney and all the places. He's like, I'm a huge fan. I was like, I fucking love this film, man.
For me, it is the Highlander is the greatest film ever made, as far as I'm concerned. And you've got Sean Connery for a start off, and you've got one of the most underrated bad guys ever in the Kurgan.
Yeah,
you've got a fantastic story, amazing photography, and the greatest soundtrack to any film ever made.
Yeah, man, it's
perfect, absolutely perfect. And you know, the Eileen Donan. Just one of the most spectacular places I've ever seen in my life. I absolutely love it up there. Like,
you actually been, have you?
Oh yeah, there was a few about 10, 15 years ago. I decided that a couple of days before New Year's Eve, I thought I've never been, so I'm going to take a trip up and see it. So took a drive up for the day. And I got there about 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. Thought, get me head down for a bit, but left the engine running. I woke up, it's minus 13 outside. Everything's white.
Someone in Scotland.
Yeah, but as soon as I opened my eyes and I seen that castle, and it was still dark enough to be lit up. And it was just beautiful. And you walk across the bridge to where there's a small like row of houses. You look down into the water. There's these big 6-foot salmon swimming up the river. Absolutely crystal clear waters. Yeah. Oh my! Yeah. It's a memorable place. Like,
sounds good, man.
Yeah. Highlander, greatest film ever made. Everybody should watch it.
They should watch it. And do you know what? I'm delighted at the people that made it, because I've been working off the back of this fucking film my entire life. So it worked out well. My entire first week at school, man, like every new teacher I had at high school was like, oh, they'd go through the register, and I would be sitting there. After the second time it happened, I started to be like, is this going to happen again? And it did. And I'd be sitting there like, right, and they'd go through all the names, and like Connor McLeod. And then in front of the entire class, they'd be like, oh, did you know that And on the first time, I was like, oh, fucking yeah, that's funny. Second time, I was like, yeah, cool, pal. And on the third time, I was like, right, this is just getting pretty fucking boring, like. Yeah, that's funny. It's just a fucking long week at school, but yeah, man, I love that film as well. I've not showed my son it. I've told my son that, man. I was like, Daddy's name's in a film. He seemed extremely unimpressed. What I was going to ask you about was the current state of the fucking CBD industry when it comes to synthetic, because we were just mentioning there about the Scottish Hemp Association and how they're doing a really fucking good job on the Scottish news. I'm doing a Scottish news thing, so I think it's Cannabis News Scotland, where I'm going to talk about the news in Scotland, the UK, and internationally, essentially. And I included one of their videos on it and how they're criticising synthetic and how it's just a fucking, I mean, that in itself, we're talking about corporate, what is it, bullshit behaviour, essentially. I mean, what do you make of the push for synthetic?
Exactly, it's just a way of limiting what we can do, whilst all the big boys are shelling out tens of thousands so that they can do whatever the hell they want. It's all corporate monopolies. It's all private and political monopolies, which, as I say, that makes what the coppers are doing state-sponsored terrorism.
Yeah,
that again is very, very easy to prove. I mean, if you go to the John Ehrlichman quote on its own. That on its own is criminal conspiracy, fraud, and terrorism to current day legislation. And it puts that one quote, it puts every single copper across the land in a position of misconduct.
The thing is, I mean, the Seed Our Future campaign, the report fucking outlined this perfectly. I mean, what stage is that at now? I mean, I know you were pushing it, like getting responses from like HMRC and the Crime Prosecution Service and stuff like that. I mean, have you heard anything back recently?
Not recently. I know obviously Guy, Kevin, and Phil have all been working together with Outlaw, trying to get a few bits and pieces together for this judicial review.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
I think that's fucking awesome.
That is a fucking win, because that's a force. I mean, that is essentially the entire community. If you were to get the medicinal people, if you were to get them that are continuously, no, just medicinal. If you were to get them to just be like, come on, let's just move it for cannabis generally. That's everybody then.
Exactly. This is why I've always said that for me, it's always seemed obvious to challenge the Schedule 1, because that's the chink in their armour. If they can't give us evidence that it meets that, then they're committing fraud.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that.
Has this been pushed? Is it you, when you're doing this? I mean, is this what you're taking to the court when you get tried, essentially? Is this what's going on?
Oh yeah, that's exactly that's going to be my defense. It's exactly what I put into my interview as well. And what you're doing here is state-sponsored terrorism, because you're enabling monopolies based on racism.
Yeah.
You know, on private political interests. Again, something else I put in the interview. They can't even claim Schedule 1 on raw cannabis simply because of CBG.
Yeah.
I mean, kind of bigger role is so highly antibiotic it kills off MRSA, so they're fucked on that one as well.
That's the reason, is that right? That's so CBG's presence immediately makes it that it's not a controlled substance?
No, it's not a Schedule 1.
Right, so what is
Schedule 1? Schedule 1 means medicinal benefit and a high propensity for abuse.
Right, okay.
Schedule 2 is medicinal benefit with a high propensity for abuse. Now, alcohol and tobacco, I would put them in a Schedule 1, no problem.
Yeah,
straight away. Weed, heroin, cocaine. I suppose weed could have its place in Schedule 2, but at the same time, it can't because of the drugs that are in the other categories. So you've got to take it down. You've got to give it another category on its own. It's got to have something else simply because of its diversity.
Yeah,
and I think that's why they're trying to break it down into the isolates and all the rest of it, isolate the different compounds, so they can. There is a company in Australia that I know of who, for me, I think they're doing real game-changing work with these isolates, because what they're doing is that they're extracting each cannabinoid in kilo amounts and then formulating per condition. Now, that's synthetic. It's effectively, you've got all natural compounds synthetically formulated, which takes out your plant selections and all the rest. You don't have to go looking for your perfect strain that's going to help you out.
Mm.
You know, personally, I prefer something like a Cannamantv to something like a Durban poison.
Yeah,
Someone's going to put us down, we're going to take us up.
Yeah.
It's
Is that the same thing that I think? Is that if that's the same people that I'm thinking of? Is that the same study that they did it on yeast? Was it they grew it on the back of yeast, and that was the?
No. This has been extracted from weed. That yeast one that's been knocked about for a few years now.
Yeah, because that's one of the things I thought. I was like, well, at least that's something. That's it's taken it away. That's slightly. I mean, it's still synthetic, obviously, but it's at least yeast is a form of biological product.
Really smoke.
What was that?
I don't imagine it being a very nice smoke.
No, fucking pretty grim, Trev. The thing is, as well, man, we need to fuck, man. Nah, it wouldn't be the best, man. And the thing is, that's what I think to myself. It's like it takes away the very nature of what cannabis is. I think one of the fears I have, man, is being a fucking old man moaning about how it used to be. Like, before the fucking corporate got in, and my son coming in and his pals, like, Dad, shut the fuck up. And then I just, you know what I mean? Because they're sitting there with their Starbucks smoke. And that's what I feel like. Like, it seems like, I think they try to avoid it to be like a corporate element is futile because it's the system that we're living in. I think the main thing is to make it that the corporate element is based in fairness for the consumer and organic means and all like fucking what's the word, man? There's a word I'm trying to think that they have it's like fucking fairness for their behavior. What's it called? Ethically minded. That's it. So they're ethical with their behavior. That's the main thing. As long as they're ethical with how they produce the plant, does it really matter if there's a corporate behind it?
I would say yes, and the figures are actually bearing that out right now. Because again, Canada, look at what's happening there. You've got all the big boys; they're all falling on their horses. Meanwhile, you've got all your little mar and pa dispensaries. They're keeping everything afloat. They're the ones that it literally comes down to ethics, but also the growers. Invest in a good grower, and you're going to have a good business. If all you're concerned about is getting product out the door, then you're not going to be too bothered about quality.
I think it's going to be difficult as well because, it seems to be the more efficient means seems to be the individuals that have been providing us all for all these years should be the next people that are actually still growing because they've been doing it the whole time. But then that's essentially legitimizing, in the eyes of the establishment, legitimizing criminality because then when cannabis turns over, they're going to be like, well, we're not going to give these people that have been breaking the law the whole time, even though they're the best people for the job. So, I mean, it's like, how do you marry that position?
Again, you look at the States. Because San Francisco is your perfect example. Because of legalization, they're expunging records back to the 70s. They're reimbursing fines. They're reimbursing confiscations. People are getting compensation for time inside and all the rest of it. But because they've got nobody who can do the job, as well as those who've criminalized, they're the ones who are now getting six-figure salaries. So a good grower, a good extractor, you're looking 90 grand a year. A good grower, 100 grand a year. A master grower, 250 grand a year. So all these guys who are now working in these dispensaries, making an absolute killing, 250 grand, six-figure salaries, are driving past the cops who are still stuck there on the 55 grand salaries.
Yeah, it'll be a good day, man. And the thing is, that's what the UK needs to do. But it seems to be, I mean, the UK, it's been so rigid and awkward walking into medicinal. In fact, sometimes I feel it's awkward to even pretend like we have medicinal, but let's pretend like we do. And it's like, how are we going to walk into recreational? It's going to be so awkward unless we have people who have been in positions that know the consumer, the people like us, people that are like, we know what we require, we know what we would reject, and that's the main thing. We know, like, I'm not fucking, why is that here? And that's what we need. Whereas individuals that are like, oh, I'm a cultivator or I'm a chemist, and they have no knowledge of cannabis, will not know what to reject. So this is the difficulty. Like, and I think that's one of the conflicts, that this is what we need to happen. So there shouldn't be maybe a consortium effort behind people that like ourselves, that we should apply this to try and become legitimate before the turnover.
Oh, absolutely. Well, this is what CDAR Future is all about. It's all about challenging those charges, making that change from the bottom up. That isn't going to come from the top down. We have to go after their low-hanging fruit. We have to go after the coppers themselves.
Yeah.
They're the ones who are enforcing this. I want to say that all of this is government's fault, but it genuinely isn't. But the system is set up so that the person who does the act is the one who takes the rap. Mm-hmm. So these cops are, I can't, you know, as I'm stoned, I can't remember what I was going.
I'm the same, Trev. That's what I was going to say though. But that thing, that the person that takes the rap, man, that's what it is. It's like whoever, like, if there's no harm, there's no crime, and this is one of the things that I think could be emphasized.
Sure, if there's no evidence, no crime.
Yeah,
there has to be evidence that you can verify the charges. If you haven't got a foundation of evidence, that's a valid objection in court.
Mm-hmm. It should be interesting when you go, man. I mean, it's going to be really nerve-wracking, but it should be interesting when you get to court. Well, good, man. Well, that's good then. That's good. Obviously, you better know the state, right?
Let them before they come through the door. So I think for anybody else, it would have been nerve-wracking for them because they haven't got the experience and they haven't got the information I've got.
Yeah, that's something that's bulletproof.
I mean, I can understand how it will be completely traumatizing for some people being locked up in a cell for 10 hours. Mm. Me, I'm singing at the top of my voice, where's your evidence? Where's your evidence? Mr. Coleman, this isn't normal behaviour. It is when you get shafted. Yeah. A young son, Matt, he even turned around and said that I'm the only person he's ever met who could be excited after a bust.
Well, no wonder, man. You know the climate for it. I mean, let's be honest. I kind of see this now. It's like people that get busted nowadays. It's kind of like earning your stripes. That's what this is like. Yeah. That's why a lot of people that they kind of want to call for it. They want to be busted, man. It's like, that would be great. Anybody that's not a part of the community would be like, what the fuck? Why would you want that? But to get busted for your cause, you are engaging with martyrdom. That's what that is.
For me, I'm thinking of the money. It's £1,000 an hour for wrongful arrest.
Is that right?
Yeah. And I was in the cells for 10 hours.
I'm sure every time you get to court, it's like, yeah, I was in there for 15 hours. This is unacceptable. By the time the court's over, it was 45 hours in the fucking cells. Can you believe this?
Yeah, they told me because I was shouting and singing my head off that I was engaging in delaying tactics. Now, what the fuck? How are you delaying tactics? Yeah. You want to stick me up for 10 hours? I'll quite happily take £1,000 an hour and wrongful arrest for you.
Yeah, that'll be good, man. That'll be the sweet fucking prize at the end, man, when this is over. Because have you got your date? I mean, what have they sent you?
Oh no, it was only about a month ago.
All right, yeah. Well, it'll probably fucking be the next year, man.
Exactly the way things are going. But that just, with what Outlaw's doing, as of next month, it could be a whole different blame field.
Yeah. Interestingly, I was going to say, interestingly, when I was looking over the Cannabis New Scotland thing, what I seen was just a fucking waterfall of different busts all across the country, Scotland and England and Wales. And that's what I think myself, I was like, it's kind of like I was saying this to somebody at work the other day. Do you know, it kind of is like they're trying to get their last bit of fucking money in for these processes before it maybe changes over, because this is the reality is when they go through these processes, finance comes their way. So the benefit on top of the engagement with locking fucking people up that are growing. So it's like, if you're going to end up changing that and people aren't going to be getting locked up, you might as well, if you're aware of this, for the top down. Sounds conspiratorial and probably bullshit, but you never know, man. It's like they could be just like, well, let's rattle in 6 months or the next 4 months of nothing but busts so we can kind of get an extra fucking $3 million in the bank.
That wouldn't surprise us in the least bit because, like you say, as long as they're catching the people who are doing the growing, then all fines, it all goes to pay for police pensions.
Yeah.
They're breaching their attestation because they're not allowed to have any sort of affiliations that might compromise their work.
Yeah,
it falls under integrity in the 7 pillars of public life, which makes up their attestation.
Yeah,
coppers have to be absolutely spot on. If they're not, they're pretty much buggered like.
Yeah.
But it comes down to us having the balls to take them on, because let's face it, nobody wants to take the coppers on.
No.
Everybody expects that the coppers get it right. So when they get it wrong, as the old saying goes, where there's blame, there's a claim.
Yeah. Yeah. Excuse me. No, 100%, Trev, and I think that's one of the difficult things, because often the police, to be honest, are intimidating. So you're not dealing with just the police as they can intimidate the public. That's what one of the tactics they use is manipulation, coercion. These are trained techniques on the fucking doorstep that they're trained to engage with, because they see, unfortunately, very often the civilian as the threat. They could potentially be the hazard or whatever, and in particular when it comes to drug legislation in particular, because they assume the drug consumer to be of a negative person,
Yeah, as I said, I was considered a junkie.
Yeah, well, I was going to ask you that. Why? What was it on two? You said two separate occasions you were considered a junkie. What were those occasions?
Just both girlfriends. When I broke up with each of them, when I broke up with them, one in around about 2005, another one about 2013, a pair of them turned around and started telling all my mates I was nothing but a junkie because I used weed for pain relief.
Yeah, that's an educated pair.
One of those things.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Unfortunately, they're reflective. There's a large number of individuals that do take that position. Fortunately, I would say that I think with the more youth that's coming through, they're kind of more seeing it as like, why is this even being spoke about? And it does help when you go into places like Holland and Barrett and you see cannabis leaves all over lots of products. That is enormously helpful, because it's normalization. This is the key again. Normalization. Just get talking about it. Get shown that it's not an issue. I mean, just make it that it's not in people's faces, but respected. And I think to normalize something, to make it used respectively, it has to be normalized. It has to be. You can't, because a lot of the time they engage with this, like, I don't know, just right in people's face, glorifying it.
I'm kind of lucky in where I live because I've got two cultural and historical markers to the trade that I can point everybody to. Auckland, you have Henry VIII's deer pen. Henry VIII, deer are cannabis's biggest predator. They go absolutely looking for the stuff. And in West Auckland, you have Henry VIII's Old Hunting Lodge, which is now the Manor House Hotel. And just for cannabis was our industrial resource during that time, during his reign, and Elizabeth I, coincidentally. Now West Auckland is a very, very historic place. Did you know it was the site of the very first World Cup in 1916. And it's also it was the home of the country's first registered serial killer in Mary Ann Cotton.
Nice, that's a good combination.
Football with us, you're vicious.
Oh, that's good, man. Well, to be honest, Trev, we'll probably just wrap up there, man, and I'll fucking get a wee scran. This has been a fucking blast, Trev. This has been absolutely. Thanks so much for coming on the channel, man. Oh,
you're very welcome, man. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks to Trev for giving me his time. And thanks to you for sticking around until the end of the video. I sincerely hope you enjoyed the content. I'll see you next time.